Hey everyone, and welcome to season 2 of Death in Cambodia, Life in America, a podcast where I sit down with my father, Robert Chow, a survivor of one of the biggest genocides in modern history, the Khmer Rouge. He escaped to America with $10 in his pocket and built a distributing company, one of the largest donut distributors in the US. How exactly did a poor, starving boy from Cambodia build an empire and achieve his American dream? I'm Dorothy, his daughter, and your host for today's episode. Let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Good morning, and welcome back to another episode of Death in Cambodia, Life in America. As I promised in season 2, we are bringing on more guests, people who have helped Robert along his journey in America, and I definitely had to make sure I brought this man onto the podcast. His name is Bob Burton. Bob was a commercial real estate agent, a broker at the time, and was the one that helped Robert find his very first shop in America. And along with the other ones following, I believe it was 3 or 4 more shops, and Bob can correct me later in the episode, but he really stepped up and helped Robert when Robert really was still in the process of learning English, learning about America, about the culture, and really putting together, how to achieve his American dream. Bob was definitely part of that for at least 4 to 5 years. So, Bob, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate that. So, your dad was an amazing person for me to know. And I'm very proud to be here today to talk about him.
Well, I'm definitely glad to have you on, Bob. Why don't we start off with just some simple introductions? Back in the day, how did you meet Robert? And do you kind of remember your first encounter with him?
Okay, it was about 38 years ago, and I went into the local donut shop, and he was there. He had a big smile on his face. He made me feel welcome. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I was going to get donuts for my family, and I was going to promote a donut shop that I had just listed. And he seemed very interested in it. That's the first time I met your dad.
Was it what city? What was this in, and what year, Bob?
It was Diamond Bar, California, and it was in 1984, I believe, 1984. About 38 years ago.
Okay. You remember, this must have been his uncle's shop at the time, right?
It was his uncle's shop, and what I found fascinating was that he was living in that donut shop. And I found that to be endearing. And the reason for it is my family in Canada, they lived in their shop too. They lived in the back of a shoe repair shop. And my uncle, much like Robert, had a fantastic personality. Big smile, told jokes, and he attracted the Vancouver Canucks, which is a really big ice hockey team in Canada, Vancouver. Mm-hmm. They'd come in there just to have their skates sharpened and listen to his jokes. And they would come to his home for parties. And he realized that he really wanted to be in sports, so he transferred his shoe repair business into a sporting goods store. It became one of the biggest in Vancouver, and he became a multimillionaire. And so when I saw Robert living in the back of that donut shop, I thought of my uncle. And I saw some really good things ahead for Robert at the same time.
Were you a regular at this donut shop at the time, Bob?
You know, it was a neighborhood one, and I did go there every once in a while to pick it up. My kids wanted it every Sunday morning, but no, I wouldn't do that. And
we have to limit ourselves. We do.
yeah. But I would say I was going there every once in a while. That was the first time I met your dad. I'd met his uncle before. He was a very gregarious person too. So
So I have to let all the listeners know as well. Bob is the only guy who knows Robert by his real name, right, Bob?
Choi, Choi Chop, and that's what I knew him by. And then I don't know, 5 or 10 years later, he transferred over to Robert, and I was very pleased to hear that. And
Right.
but I always when the first time I think of him, it's always Choi, and so if I say that, it's really Robert. So
Yes, no. And I think this kind of goes to show that Bob really was kind of really one of the first people that helped my dad at the time. You know, if there was only a certain amount of people who really knew him by Choi. I mean, most people at this point know him by Robert. Nobody really knows him by Choi. So you really were there in the very, very beginning. So, at the time, Bob, did you know that Robert was a Khmer Rouge survivor? I know you were kind of drawn to his personality. You were there every once in a while. You joked, chit chatted, but did you know that he was a survivor of the Khmer Rouge?
when I first met Robert, no, we got to know each other. He gained trust in me. Um, we opened up an escrow, even though he probably didn't know all the words on the purchase agreement and the escrow instructions. And during that time, when he had trust in me, he started talking about his life and where he'd come from, and it was heart wrenching because he told me that he escaped from Cambodia with guns pointed at him, and to be able to get out of that country, he had to take his valuables, jewels that he had hidden in his clothes, to give to them to come to this country. And that was really hard for me to hear. You know, really, really
Mhm.
hard for me to hear. I knew, I knew about pothole. I knew how barbaric and brutal that man was. How he went to France, instead of getting a beautiful French wife, he learned about communism, and he brought it back to Cambodia and wanted to enforce that upon the people. He wanted to destroy their culture. And if he had to kill people to do that, he was more than willing to do it. And thank God the Vietnamese came in and stopped it. But yeah, that's what I knew. And so when I heard that story, not only because I liked him, but because of that story, I wanted to help him achieve whatever way I could, help him get his American dream. I knew he was going to do it, but I still wanted to be there to help him if he needed it.
Kind of, going back to the first conversations of even talking about having his first shop, he mentions in our recordings between him and I about, having this dream of owning a bunch of donut shops. And do you kind of remember the first time he brought it up to you, Bob, and was like, "Hey, Bob, I really want to own my own donut shop."
Yeah, when I brought that up, I could see, I could, I don't know if it's sparkle in his eyes. It's more what you see in girls, but he was excited.
Yeah.
And particularly when I told him the price, because it was not as expensive as a typical donut shop, but there was a lot of hidden value in this business. It was in
Hmm.
Pomona, California, and it
Hmm.
had an absentee owner. What that meant is that very likely, because the owner wasn't there, some of the sales weren't being reported. And when your
Hmm.
dad went there to look at the business, he could see that the sales revenue, after he looked at the business all day long, several times, that the sales revenue was higher than it was advertised. And
Hmm.
that piqued his interest. And then I knew he was a good businessman because what he did is he targeted where the traffic was in the morning. In a donut shop, you typically are on the side of the road leading to the freeway.
Hmm.
He focused on the other businesses in the area, what his competition was. He looked at the residencies, the homes around it, and he did a good analysis. And I said, wow, I want to work with this guy. He knows what even though his English was weak, I knew I wanted to work with him.
So were you the one that brought the shop to him, Bob,
Yeah,
or did
yes.
he find it?
No, I
Okay,
brought it to him. I had listed it, and it was. I just thought that the best way to sell it is to go to a donut shop and see if they have an interest in having a second or third one, and that's what I was doing, just part of my
that's very
business.
smart.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it was good that I found him. So
right,
yeah,
right. So, and at the time, was it hard to find donut shops, or what was the real estate kind of
you know,
at the time?
that was really early in the process where there
Okay.
weren't a lot of donut shops around,
Mm-hmm.
and I like to eat into something else here. So um, I could find other donut shops for him relatively easy. People wanted to sell it because I think a lot of people didn't want to work as hard as they needed to. It was just,
It's hard work.
long. You go in at midnight or whatever, you bake the donuts and or 4 in the morning, whatever time you do, and you work all day long. And so a lot of people, it was just too hard of lives for them, and so it was relatively easy to find them. But your dad did something amazing, and I'll let you lead me to that. But he did
Yeah.
something really amazing. Why his business blossomed and why it grew so much. He wasn't
Hmm.
in the box all the time. He got out of the box. So
Right, right. Well, why don't we go through the process of the first shop? You found a donut shop for him
yeah.
and you gave him a price. What was your recollection of what that whole process was like with him?
Um, well, the first part of the process was I discovered he didn't have the money. He didn't have the $30,000. But
Was it early on you found out, or was it
yeah, I
later?
found out. I go, uh-oh. But because I just assumed, if you're going to say I want to buy a business, you got the money. I didn't. but uh, but anyway, he was resourceful. He went out, got 1,000 here, 10,000 there from family and friends, and he had the money. That's the first part. Now the second part scared the heck out of me. When we were getting ready to close, he walks into our real estate office, comes tripping into our real estate office with a shopping bag full of money, cash, little bills and big bills, $30,000. And we're going,
$1 bills, $5 bills.
oh God, we were just shocked. I mean, just like, and but he had the money. He wanted to buy the business, and so after I got done being shocked and nervously laughing, I took him into the back of the real estate office to a private office and had the Ed Krolak. He was the broker, probably the most honest broker I've ever worked with in my life, and he took care of Joy. He wanted to make sure that the cash money got into escrow. So what I suspect Ed did, and I'm just logically thinking as a broker, is that he took Joy's money to the bank, put it in his real estate trust account, and then wrote a check to escrow for Robert. I suspect that's what happened. And thank
Hmm.
God, the following donut shops that he bought from me as a broker, he brought either a cashier's check or had the money wired into escrow because it was easy on my heart. Yeah,
Was it that probably was the most interesting way, or in one of the most fascinating ways you've ever dealt with somebody trying to purchase a shop
absolutely,
from you? Yes.
absolutely. I mean, it was so. It's always a check, cashier's check, wire money. He has this big bag of money, shopping bag, not in an attaché case, but a shopping bag.
Do you remember his face when he walked in with all that cash?
Now he was proud of himself. I did what I said. Hey, Bob, I'm ready to close.
I've got 30,000 right here.
Yeah, your dad. Um, Part of why I liked him, he had a great smile, great personality. He was humorous and just the kind of guy you wanted to be around.
Hmm.
When he was younger, and I was already married and have kids, but if I was going to university, he would have been a great person to be around. He knew how to work hard, but he knew how to have fun. And
Hmm.
so that was what you're saying. Yeah, when he came in, he was all happy.
Did you have did you have any fears about him,
You
Bob?
know,
Worries?
I've had to really think about that. I really care that people understand in a real estate transaction what they're getting into. And I try to walk the people through the process so that they know where they're going. That's very important. Some people, it's most really successful people want to know where they're going.
Right.
And so I did worry about Robert's English a lot. But in retrospect, I think I might have been confounded by the fact that he had an accent. And so I'm good with accents, but I think it's I don't think his English was as bad as what I thought it was initially because he
Hmm.
was a humorous person. He did laugh. He did know how to enjoy life. So that's what. But I wanted to make sure that he understood what he was doing. But a lot of it I knew was trust. He really trusted me, and for that I really appreciate it because I don't want to make money as a broker if the client isn't happy. It's very
Hmm.
important. It always
Hmm.
has been. And that they know what the process.
And when we talk about him bringing cash to the table, like actual physical cash, I mean, what was it hard in any other situation if it wasn't Robert, if somebody were actually to bring in cash, would it have been possible to really go through with with the escrow? I mean, how did they even count it all? Or was it just that people had to jump through hoops to get Robert this shop?
No, Robert jumped through hoops to get the money,
Hmm.
but Ed Krolak was a man of integrity,
Yeah.
and I imagine him and Robert went to the bank together, and they counted
Hmm.
the money and uh, deposited it. I mean,
Right.
Ed saw a lot of things in Joey or Robert that I saw, and he
Hmm.
was willing to really help, um, to help him. Okay,
Help him with this
yeah,
first
help
shop.
him. Yeah, because he knew what kind of person he was. When you're in real estate, you get to be a really good judge of character after a while. Not
Hmm.
newbies, but with people that have been in for a while, you kind of know you can predict probably 95% chance that these people are the kind of people you want to be around. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense to you, but we really liked Choi. Our office liked him.
Yeah. Well, as you know, after the first shop, he got the shop and he was sleeping in that shop too. Do you kind of remember or recall
The first
how
shop,
did yeah, the very
yeah.
first shop?
Oh man, uh, it was really unnerving to me what happened. He closed the escrow, big smile on his face, headed off to work, cleaned up the business because those people didn't really have it as clean as it should have been.
Right.
Wiped the windows off, made the best donuts in the world, and somebody robs him the first night, the very first night. I felt horrible. I felt, but I talked to him, and he did not stop. He kept moving forward, and at that point, I knew nothing was going to stop him from the American dream. He was so determined, just like we've talked about before, just determined.
Hmm. Hmm.
Nothing was going to stop him, and that made me happy at that time because I was pretty miserable when I first heard about it. So, but
Hmm.
he's a good man. He's struggled in life, and he gets through those struggles and moves on, and that's what he did that day, and that's what he's
Yeah.
done his entire career.
And Bob, I think before, when we first discussed in our kind of entry phone call, you mentioned that there were three or four points about things about Robert, about his character. I don't know if you quite remember. I guess if you wanted to kind of shed some more light on why do you think Robert was successful?
Well, a lot of people don't realize that you can know everything about a business but not be successful. They just a lot of people don't get it. You can be the smartest guy in the world, but you don't know how to run a business. And what it takes is somebody that's knowledgeable about a business. And I knew Choi's was knowledgeable about business because his dad was a successful businessman, and he had told me about that. But
Mm-hmm.
what happened is like like my uncle George, Choi knew he smiled. He made people laugh. He made you feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
He was the kind of person you wanted to be with. You liked being around him, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the key to being one of the keys to being a successful business person. And I think that's bode very well with Choi all these years. Uh,
I
there
think you
are other
mentioned too.
there are other issues that I want to get into
Mm-hmm.
down the road of why he also is a successful business person. But we'll move down that road and get through that point. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I remember you mentioning before that there were certain things about him, like the way that he really pays attention to people's expressions. And,
Yeah.
even if he didn't have the language, he really was keen to body language and
Yeah.
tone, and
Yeah.
was really kind of catered and used that to his advantage, right?
Yeah. Yeah. He just he was very attentive. He was
Hmm.
very focused, and I could see that he was watching my body language, my facial expressions, and he listened to every word. And right at that time, I realized he was a very smart person because that's what
Hmm.
smart people do. That's
Hmm.
what they do.
Hmm.
And that was refreshing for me to be with somebody like that, even though maybe his language didn't reflect somebody that was really intelligent. He was very, very intelligent. So
Hmm. Hmm. So after getting the first shop, he grew that business. I'm sure he grew that business, I think, twice or three times. He really just pumped life into that shop
oh
that you sold it.
yeah, well, actually I think the first couple days or first month, the business was up a couple $1,000s a month just because of the absentee ownership deal. But then
Right.
he actually grew it into a gold mine. I don't know if he ever told you that, but that business made a lot of money.
Hmm. He
And
did.
he uh, he went on from there and bought some other donut shops from me.
Right.
They weren't as eventful for me because he knew the process, and he didn't need me as much, and so it was just, hey Bob, I want to buy this donut shop. Here you go.
Right.
But
Right.
what he did, um, what he did is he bought those donut shops, and then he went on to a higher level. He had an epiphany. He had a vision of how he could make even more money. And what he did was he said, I could buy donut shops and make them profitable and make a good return on my investment. But he said, I wonder if I went out and found a location. He was a really great location finder. You should know that about your dad because he always
Hmm.
picked great locations. He would find a vacant retail shell, and he'd go in there and he'd spend $40,000, $50,000, work it for 4 to 6 months, get the business to be very successful, and then sell it for 4 times what he invested in four to
Hmm.
five months. And he was doing this 2, 3 times a year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but what I noticed about your dad was it wasn't all about profit. That was important, but he helped family and friends get their donut shops too.
Hmm.
Figured out ingenious ways for them to be able to own donut shops. And
Right.
I was really proud of him because he helped people. And I think that's another key factor in being a successful business person. You
Hmm.
help other people along the way, and he did. And I was
Hmm.
really proud of him for that.
You always knew that he was going to make it, right, Bob?
Unequivocally. There was there was nothing that stopped him except um, I did worry about a few things, and we'll talk. I worried about his health because he worked way too much, but I also knew my aunt and uncle worked way too much to become successful too, and I've never known anybody that didn't become financially successful not to work hard. It takes a lot of sacrifice, and he did.
Why don't we talk about that in the sense of him working so much? Do you have some examples of what you remember from that time?
Well, um, what happened was that you have to understand. I knew your dad when he was a very young man,
Right.
and kind of happy go lucky type of guy. And I saw the stress that he was going through, and um, so we're talking maybe a couple decades later. We had lunch together, and I was I knew that Troy was doing really well financially. I could tell that, but at the same time, I knew that he was very stressed, and I was a little bit worried about his health, to be honest with you. And so I put my big foot into the arena to try to see if I could help. And I found out that he really hadn't taken his family on a vacation. And that, to me, was red flags all over the place. And I reminded Joy that, look, the American dream isn't just riches and fancy houses. It's the memories that you have with your family. And he kind of looked at me and he said, we talked about that. And he said, yeah, I need to spend more time with my family and take them on vacations.
Well, why don't we talk about modern day, Bob? What is your relationship with him now, and then looking back on helping Robert through his journey, um, which I know he is very grateful for. I don't know. What would you say to him? He's not here.
Oh,
So what
well,
would
I
you
tell
say
him
to
I'm mad at him because he didn't buy a McDonald's franchise like he said he was, you know,
him?
yeah. And he never played a round of golf with me.
He was too
Uh,
busy working.
yeah. He never sent me a picture of his koi pond, and he hasn't had lunch with me lately. So, but the thing is, Robert, um, when I compare him to when he was like your age, and when I compare him to the conversations that I have now, when he was your age, he was penniless almost. Today he's a rich man, but he's still the same person. He's still the same honest person, same happy-go-lucky person that he was then, and respectful and appreciative. And those are attributes that anybody that goes into business and wants to be successful needs to remember. Another thing that your dad did along the way was that I've never had this happen ever before. I've had people send me a card or call me up and say, thank you, Bob, or, send me a Christmas card or, whatever. But your dad invited me and my wife and a few other people to a really classy, expensive Asian restaurant in Monterey Park, California. And it was his way of saying he appreciated me and thanked me. And to this day, I still remember that meal. Um, and that is that it was great. The appetizers were fantastic, but it also had shark soup, and I think it was black chicken feet. I believe that's what they were called. And very expensive. And honestly, I think it tasted great. I like it. Most people, maybe other people wouldn't, but I loved it. And very expensive, but it's only served on special occasions. And that was amazing that Robert, this is 3, 4, 5 years after I had met him. He came back
Mm-hmm.
and thanked me in that way, and so appreciative,
Mm-hmm.
very appreciative man. So I want you to know that about your dad. He's special to me that way.
What lessons have you learned from helping Robert and having Robert in your life?
Well, I was a foster child, okay, and um, I had people help me along the way. All right, and so it was important for me to give back because I had university professors that liked me and actually helped me get my first job, and and gave me guidance along the way because they knew I really didn't have a good father image. So what I'm saying is that I actually gained confidence in myself by knowing Robert because he had the same struggles I had, and we were able to kind of help each other. And I feel like I'm a better person because of that, because of what we shared with each other. And your dad was a much bigger risk taker than I was. I was too scared to take risks. I did well in life, but I mean, not like your dad did. And but he showed me that you can be rich and still be a nice person. He showed me that life, you can still keep your best attributes throughout your whole life, no matter what BS people throw in your face, and they are. No matter how many struggles you have, having those characteristics get you through it, and you're still a good person. And that your dad is a good person. He helped me be a good person too. I don't know if that's my best statement.
Mm. Well, I appreciate you coming on here, Bob. Are there any last words that you would like to touch on or point on, or about your experience with Robert, especially while he was younger?
No. No. That was before he was married. No, I'm just teasing you. No, I just, it, it- I've, over the years, I've just met some pretty amazing people. And he's one of them. And he's made me feel important in terms of that I like helping people, and he was willing to accept it and use it. He had his own skills, but he at least he listened to me and he made me feel appreciative, and that's what I like. That's what I liked about your dad, um, he's very. When I think of him, I think of him in a really positive way. I really do.
Mhm.
Okay, and that
Mhm.
gives me hope for my life too. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way I feel about it.